Hi, this is Denise from Denise in Wonderland, a magical journey of faith through Christ. Today, we will sink deeper into God's Word and His truth. We have to chase the presence of God, and we can do so through His Word. Let's get started. Genesis chapter 24. Abraham was old and well stricken in age. Yahweh had blessed Abraham in all things. Abraham said to his servant, the elder of his house, who ruled over all that he had, "Please put your hand under my thigh. I will make you swear by Yahweh, the God of heaven and the God of the earth, that you shall not take a wife for my son of the daughters of the Canaanites, among whom I live. But you shall go to my country and to my relatives and take a wife for my son Isaac." The servant said to him, "What if the woman isn't willing to follow me to this land? Must I bring your son again to the land you came from?" Abraham said to him, "Beware that you don't bring my son there again. Yahweh, the God of heaven, who took me from my father's house and from the land of my birth, who spoke to me and who swore to me, saying, 'I will give this land to your offspring,' he will send his angel before you, and you shall take a wife for my son from there. If the woman isn't willing to follow you, then you shall be clear from this oath to me. Only you shall not bring my son there again." The servant put his hand under the thigh of Abraham his master and swore to him concerning this matter. The servant took 10 camels of his master's camels and departed, having a variety of good things of his master's with him. He arose and went to Mesopotamia, to the city of Nahor. He made the camels kneel down outside the city by the well of water at the time of evening, the time that women go out to draw water. He said, "Yahweh, the God of my master Abraham, please give me success today and show kindness to my master Abraham. Behold, I am standing by the spring of water. The daughters of the men of the city are coming out to draw water. Let it happen that the young lady to whom I will say, 'Please let down your pitcher that I may drink,' and she will say, 'Drink, and I will also give your camels a drink,' let her be the one you have appointed for your servant Isaac. By this I will know that you have shown kindness to my master." Before he had finished speaking, behold, Rebekah came out, who was born to Bethuel, the son of Milcah, the wife of Nahor, Abraham's brother, with her pitcher on her shoulder. The young lady was very beautiful to look at, a virgin. No man had known her. She went down to the spring, filled her pitcher, and came up. The servant ran to meet her and said, "Please give me a drink, a little water from your pitcher." She said, "Drink, my lord." She hurried and let down her pitcher on her hand and gave him drink. When she had done giving him drink, she said, "I will also draw for your camels until they have done drinking." She hurried and emptied her pitcher into the trough and ran again to the well to draw and drew for all his camels. The man looked steadfastly at her, remaining silent to know whether Yahweh had made his journey prosperous or not. As the camels had done drinking, the man took a golden ring of half a shekel weight and 2 bracelets for her hands of 10 shekels weight of gold, and said, "Whose daughter are you? Please tell me, is there room in your father's house for us to lodge in?" She said to him, "I am the daughter of Bethuel, the son of Milcah, whom she bore to Nahor." She said moreover to him, "We have both straw and feed enough and room to lodge in." The man bowed his head and worshipped Yahweh. He said, "Blessed be Yahweh, the God of my master Abraham, who has not forsaken his loving kindness and his truth toward my master. As for me, Yahweh has led me on the way to the house of my master's relatives." The young lady ran and told her mother's house about these words. Rebekah had a brother, and his name was Laban. Laban ran out to the man to the spring. When he saw the ring and the bracelets on his sister's hands, and when he heard the words of Rebekah his sister saying, "This is what the man said to me," he came to the man. Behold, he was standing by the camels at the spring. He said, "Come in, you blessed of Yahweh. Why do you stand outside? For I have prepared the house and room for the camels." The man came into the house, and he unloaded the camels. He gave straw and feed for the camels, and water to wash his feet and the feet of the men who were with him. Food was set before him to eat, but he said, "I will not eat until I have told my message." He said, "Speak on." He said, "I am Abraham's servant. Yahweh has blessed my master greatly. He has become great. He has given him flocks and herds, silver and gold, male servants and female servants, and camels and donkeys. Sarah, my master's wife, bore a son to my master when she was old. He has given all that he has to him. My master made me swear, saying, 'You shall not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites, in whose land I live, but you shall go to my father's house and to my relatives and take a wife for my son.' I asked my master, 'What if the woman will not follow me?' He said to me, 'Yahweh, before whom I walk, will send his angel with you and prosper your way. You shall take a wife for my son from my relatives and of my father's house. Then will you be clear from my oath when you come to my relatives. If they don't give her to you, you shall be clear from my oath.' I came today to the spring and said, 'Yahweh, the God of my master Abraham, if now you do prosper my way which I go, behold, I am standing by this spring of water. Let it happen that the maiden who comes out to draw, to whom I will say, "Please give me a little water from your pitcher to drink," and she will tell me, "Drink, and I will also draw for your camels." Let her be the woman whom Yahweh has appointed for my master's son.' Before I had finished speaking in my heart, behold, Rebekah came out with her pitcher on her shoulder. She went down to the spring and drew. I said to her, 'Please let me drink.' She hurried and let down her pitcher from her shoulder, and she said, 'Drink, and I will also give your camels a drink.' So I drank, and she also gave the camels a drink. I asked her and said, 'Whose daughter are you?' She said, 'The daughter of Bethuel, Nahor's son, whom Milcah bore to him.' I put the ring on her nose and the bracelets on her hands. I bowed my head and worshiped Yahweh and blessed Yahweh, the God of my master Abraham, who had led me in the right way to take my master's brother's daughter for his son. Now, if you will deal kindly and truly with my master, tell me. If not, tell me, that I may return to the right hand or to the left." Then Laban and Bethuel answered, "The thing proceeds from Yahweh. We can't speak to you bad or good. Behold, Rebekah is before you. Take her and go, and let her be your master's son's wife, as Yahweh has spoken." When Abraham's servant heard their words, he bowed himself down to the earth to Yahweh. The servant brought out jewels of silver and jewels of gold and clothing and gave them to Rebekah. He also gave precious things to her brother and her mother. They ate and drank, he and the men who were with him, and stayed all the night. They rose up in the morning, and he said, "Send me away to my master." Her brother and her mother said, "Let the young lady stay with us a few days, at least 10. After that, she will go." He said to them, "Don't hinder me, since Yahweh has prospered my way. Send me away that I may go to my master." They said, "We will call the young lady and ask her." They called Rebekah and said to her, "Will you go with this man?" She said, "I will go." They sent away Rebekah their sister with her nurse, Abraham's servant, and his men. They blessed Rebekah and said to her, "Our sister, may you be the mother of thousands of 10,000s, and let your offspring possess the gate of those who hate them." Rebekah arose with her ladies. They rode on the camels and followed the man. The servant took Rebekah and went his way. Isaac came from the way of Beer-lahai-roi, for he lived in the land of the south. Isaac went out to meditate in the field at the evening. He lifted up his eyes and saw, and behold, there were camels coming. Rebekah lifted up her eyes, and when she saw Isaac, she dismounted from the camel. She said to the servant, "Who is the man who is walking in the field to meet us?" The servant said, "It is my master." She took her veil and covered herself. The servant told Isaac all the things that he had done. Isaac brought her into his mother Sarah's tent and took Rebekah, and she became his wife. He loved her. Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. All right. Um, so we have Genesis here, and I have to admit it's a little sad. Now we're getting towards the end of Abraham's life, but we have here right before. We'll start seeing this more too. That as once some of the people in the Bible near the end of their life, sometimes they start making plans for not just themselves, but a lot of times for their for those they leave behind, and we can definitely relate to that, kind of like making a will. So it's important when Abraham has received all these promises from God, but he's also received some blessings. But we have to remember there are some promises that Abraham will not be alive to physically see with his physical eyes. So one of the blessings is that his family, his children and his children's children will possess this land. They will become a great people. So Abraham understands that the passing on of this faith in Yahweh is critical to survival. Remember, he has lived as a foreigner his entire life. He has not been settled. He's been settled in God. And so he wants to ensure that when he leaves his son Isaac behind, that he has a wife, he marries into a family that will be conducive to this faith in Yahweh. And so he tells his servant, he hasn't put his hand under his thigh. And from what I read, it actually signifies a very solemn promise. So this shows how important this is to Abraham at the end of his life. So what he tells him is he's like, look, I need you to make sure that my son does not marry a Canaanite daughter. Even though I've lived here, he's like, it's interesting. He's like, even though he's lived here and God has blessed him there, he still does not belong. And this is not he's like, these are not my people. He's like, these people are not mine. And it's nothing against the Canaanites, but it is so important when it comes to passing on the faith in God. God, he knows how important it is that he makes sure that his son marries into a family that will not jeopardize the covenant with God. He wants to make sure that things go well with his child. And the Canaanites, they're not worshiping Yahweh. So he's like, I just want to make sure that I put my son in the best position when I leave. And this is important. No, we're not necessarily giving our children in marriage right now, but it is important that we want to make sure that when we leave this earth, that we place our children in the best position to better serve God. There are things that we can do that can make it harder for our kids to serve God. So let's face it, this world is a tough world to live in as is. So anything we can do to help our children have a greater faith is always important. So in one of these things, the servant, one of these scriptures, the servant says, hey, what if the woman I find doesn't want to come back here? And so the servant is in essence asking, well, is it okay for Isaac then, if the woman doesn't want to go, can Isaac just go back to where you're from? And Abraham makes it very clear that under no circumstances should his son return there. He's like, if the girl doesn't want to come, then I release you from this oath. But my son cannot go back there. Now, it doesn't mean it's bad. When I was really reading about it, again, this ties into Abraham's origin story, the origin of this great faith he had. One of the first things that God asked him to do was to leave his family, leave all he knew. This is very important. I believe, I can't remember if I said it the last time or the time before, but God wants to make sure there is no competition between himself and the world. And it's very difficult if you are living around elders and close family members. It's going to be very difficult that if God tells you something that they disagree with, you may start being in a conflict because you're like, well, but they say this. And so Abraham wants to make sure that his son follows the same model that God laid out for him. So he's like, no, he needs to be depending only on God. He, under no circumstances, does he need to go back home. And of course, you could say, well, but why not? He's living among strangers. But see, living among strangers, living in the wilderness is the place that God wants you to be. God wants us. Now, we don't live in the wilderness, but sometimes God wants to move you into a wilderness season of your life because he wants you to start to see who he is. And it's a lot easier to see who God is when you do not have all the comforts that you expect. And so God will challenge you. There will be situations you'll fall into that are foreign to you, and you have to learn how to traverse this new type of situation with only God on your side. But it's only when God is on your side, you can see it, and then you can bit your strength. You will realize that your strength comes from God, and you have a much greater faith. So that's what we see happening here. And then Abraham expresses this great faith in Yahweh. He's like, look, God's going to send an angel before you to make this happen, because God obviously understands, because God has made so many promises about Abraham's child and his lineage. So he's like, I'm not worried. He's like, the angel's going to come before you. He said, but, hey, if you really can't get a girl, can't find one, don't worry about it. I release you from the oath. But Abraham was kind of saying that, but he was answering the question, but it was very obvious that Abraham believed, oh no, God has an appointed wife for my son Isaac. And so the servant, he follows through with the oath. He grabs 10 camels, and I wrote to make sure I paid attention to the number, but 10 camels. He took some men with him, and then he traveled to the city of Nahor. And so what he does when he gets there, because he's got to figure out who this appropriate wife will be for Isaac. And remember, Abraham said that the angel of God will make a way. Like, God will go there before you and make sure that he helps you identify who this wife is. So the servant kind of leans into that knowledge and being confident in this. So what he says is, hey, if I'm going to go during evening time, which is when the sun is going down, it's probably a really good time for women to come out, young women to come out and draw water. And so he's like, I'm going to ask for water. I'm obviously a weary traveler. And the first person who not only lets me drink from the pitcher, but also if she just volunteers and says, hey, let me give water to your camels, and she goes and does that, he's like, that will be the woman. He's like, God, please reveal this to me. And so he does it. He does this. Rebecca comes out and she does that. And what I love about it is that she actually hurries. And remember how many camels he had? He has 10 camels. So obviously she's looking at all these camels, these animals. So we see a concern not just for this weary traveler, but she also has a concern for his property as well as for these animals. So this reveals a lot about the heart of Rebecca. And remember, Isaac is going to lives in Canaan. So we have to remember that she's not going to be living in a place that looks like where she is now. She's going to be a foreigner in a strange land. So she needs to be someone who's willing to be around strangers. And she also has to be a person who has a heart, who's willing to help others, because that's kind of what Abraham did. Remember when he saw the travelers, the 3 men, and it turns out, one of them most likely was God. Some people say all 3 of them could have been the Trinity, but it reminds me of that episode. And so we see here that, as as this young woman is rushing around trying to help the stranger, and then she gives water to each one instead of to each individual camel. She's going back and forth, back and forth. And then there's a part where she says in verse 19, I will also draw for your camels until they have done drinking. So she's not going to just give them a little sip. She's like, no, I am going to continue to provide water to the camels until they have gotten their fill. And that's just, this shows so much about her character. And so this is the woman. This will be the wife of Isaac. And so once Abraham's servant realizes this, he gives her some jewelry, he gives her a nose ring, and then he asks her, hey, do you have room in your home where I can stay, where you can lodge me? And of course she says yes. And so he goes to her family. He speaks to her brother. And what's interesting is when the servant is offered food, because again, he's tired. He's been traveling. He says no. Let's see. It is in verse 33. He says, I will not eat until I have told my message. Now, when you're offered food, you're supposed to accept it, especially back then. You're not supposed to reject hospitality. But he's not rejecting it, but he's showing that he cannot enjoy any of that until he delivers the message that he was sent there to do. He does not want to delay. And again, this shows even the character of the servant. And this shows a lot about Abraham, because this servant takes this very seriously. And I think he takes it seriously because Abraham is a good master. And that is why his servant is so concerned about doing his master's bidding and making sure that he accomplishes what he sent him out to do. And so he says, hey, I got to tell you the whole thing. And I love when he tells the whole thing, he tells the whole thing. Like, he's starting from day one. He's telling him about the history of Abraham. And this is good because he's telling him about the reputation of Abraham. He's telling him that he's just not just anyone. He tells him about how he's been blessed. And then he tells him about the oath, about needing to find a daughter who is from the land that he's in right now and not a woman from Canaan. And then he tells him about how Yahweh himself is the one that came there to identify Rebekah, identify the wife that Isaac needed. And so he came to and then he tells him about how he spoke to God that he expected that the woman was supposed to offer water to the camels as well as to him. And then he says what Rebecca said. He gets in so much detail. And this is important because he's also tying Yahweh into this. And I think because he told this story in such an in-depth way, and this whole time he's not eating. So this shows how serious this is. And then he mentions Yahweh. So when Laban and Bethuel answer, they're like, this comes from the Lord. And they're like, well, we can't tell you no. We're like, this comes from God himself. And who are we to oppose God's will? And so they decide, hey, you can go ahead and go. And so the servant, though, he again, we talked about transactions. He gives them a bunch of gold and clothing. He gives it to Rebecca, and he gives stuff to the brother. He gives stuff to the mother. But then he tells them, okay, you need to let me go back, because he needs permission to be able to leave and to be able to take Rebecca. And at first they want to keep her for 10 days. And he's like, don't hinder me. He's like, don't delay me. He's like, if God has blessed this situation, I can't delay. I need to take her, and, I need to return. So let me know, do I have your approval to go and to take Rebecca? And so they call Rebecca and they say, they ask her, like, are you okay with leaving with him? And she is okay with it. And this is all a God ordained situation here. Everyone seems to be on the same page. And she leaves with her nurse, and she has like a set of women with her, and so then they leave. And what's wonderful is this is like a love at first sight type scene in the Bible, and I don't think we've had a love at first sight scene, and I don't know if we had one after this, but we have one here. Well, no, we do have another love at first sight scene, but this is our first love at first sight scene, because she sees Rebecca when they get to where Isaac is. She doesn't know it's Isaac, but she sees this man in the field, and she dismounts the camel, and she's like, "Who is this man?" And then the servant's like, "Well, it's my master." And so she takes her veil, she covers herself, as is appropriate during that time and in that region. And it's interesting because this is Isaac. He lifted up his eyes and saw that the camels were coming. But I think Rebecca saw him, and I'm wondering, like, I think she really loved him and immediately. And we see in the very end that Isaac, they get married, and it says he loved her. I mean, it's one of the final lines of this chapter. And so this is like a little love story that we get to see. And this is an extensive extensive chapter. I mean, this is 67 verses. And this is a nice love story. But that concludes kind of my thoughts on this, just kind of breaking it down for you, just because it was so long. But one of the things I want to leave you with is I want you to think about how God will sometimes God has to make things happen, because it was remember, Abraham didn't have a chance to go there. And so sometimes there are things, sometimes we have a big ask. Sometimes there's a situation you have in your life, and it's just so large that that it's just, there's no way it's going to happen. I mean, it's just like the servant's like, well, what if she doesn't want to come back with me? I mean, how are we going to do this? I mean, you're not going, and neither is the son. And I think what we see play out here is how God's hand is moving, how God literally, he has selected Rebecca. God makes sure that the servant uses wisdom in order to determine who the right woman is as well. And then also God had to work on the hearts of Rebecca and her family, because any of them could have said no. They could have said, well, I don't know about you. They're like, yeah, you gave us some gold and this, that, and the other, but I don't know. Maybe we need to meet this guy. So you see God is working on the hearts of Laban, Bethuel, but then also God worked on the heart of Rebecca, because remember, they asked her, do you feel comfortable going with this man? And she said yes. She could have said no, because they didn't ask her that without planning on making a decision based off of her response. So if she had said no, they probably would have said no too. And also the speed in which this happened too, because he's like, don't hinder me. I mean, they could have easily said, whoa, 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 if you want to move fast, then the deal's off. No, she's staying. So we see how God just completely makes this almost impossible task that you would think for a servant, it makes it possible. Finds the right wife, selects her, is able to get them to get her to travel with him, and then returns her there. And then Isaac, he obviously loved her. So this all worked out very, very well. And so sometimes we have to, whether we're looking for a spouse or whether we're hoping for, something that just seems so impossible, lean on God, and depend on him to make it happen. Sometimes it's not meant for us to figure it out. And sometimes once it works out, if we start to think about how it happened, we may not be able to explain it, because we may say, that was actually quite impossible and that shouldn't have happened. But we want to have those stories. We want to be able to encourage our children and our children's children. We have to remember that Abraham is our spiritual great grandfather. We are the spiritual descendants of Abraham. So this story, we're seeing our spiritual grandparents. We're watching this story. This story is left behind for us to encourage us. So I want you to pick today. I want you to, as you think about this, I want you to think about some things that maybe shouldn't have happened, that should have been impossible in your life. And I want you to thank God for it, because sometimes we just think, I don't like the phrase because I say it sometimes, oh, that was just pure luck, or that was good karma. Those are horrible phrases to say, and I had to break myself from saying those, because it robbed God of the glory of those events, because God made them happen. So recall at least one, maybe two things that you know shouldn't have happened, and praise and thank God for it. It doesn't matter that it happened in the past. We want to celebrate those moments and say, God, I'm grateful that when I may not have necessarily brought it up to you, you were concerned enough about me to make a way to make this possible, and just thank him. And I promise you that the more you thank him in things, the closer you will grow in your relationship with God. But I leave just that with all of you. I hope you have a wonderful, blessed day. Have a good one. Bye.